The collapse. The seismic alarm screamed through Tunnel 7 just as Darius Kale finished marking his survey coordinates. He had 3 seconds to register the sound before the ceiling began its terrible descent. Out. Everyone out. His voice barely cut through the grinding roar of shifting stone. The other miners scrambled toward the exit, but Darius saw her, the Sylphine environmental monitor, Nessara Valden, standing frozen near the eastern support beam. Her luminous skin flickered pale blue with what humans had always interpreted as fear. Typical, some bitter part of his mind thought. They fall apart in a crisis. But his body moved before his prejudice could stop him. Darius lunged across the collapsing space, wrapping one arm around her slender waist and pulling her toward a narrow alcove he'd mapped last week. The world became dust and thunder. A support beam crashed where Nessara had stood moments before. They tumbled into the alcove together, Darius covering her body with his as debris rained down. Her skin felt warm beneath his hands, not cold and fragile as he'd expected. When the worst of the collapse subsided, they were sealed in darkness, pressed together in a space barely large enough for two. "Are you hurt?" Darius coughed out dust, trying to put distance between them in the cramped space. "No." Her voice was steady, carrying a melodic quality that seemed at odds with their situation. "Are you?" He did a quick inventory. Bruised ribs, bleeding forearm. "I'll live. The rescue team should reach us in a few hours." Nessara's bioluminescence slowly brightened, casting soft silver light across their stone prison. In that glow, Darius saw her face clearly for the first time. High cheekbones, eyes like liquid mercury, an expression far calmer than he felt. "The eastern wall is unstable," she said, tilting her head as if listening to something he couldn't hear. "We need to brace it." Before he could argue, she was moving, not with the delicate, tentative steps he'd seen Sylphine take in the colony proper, but with fluid efficiency. She pressed her palms against a cracked section of wall, and Darius watched in stunned silence as a faint shimmer spread from her touch, the stone seeming to stabilize under her hands. "What are you doing?" "Reinforcing the molecular bonds." She glanced back at him, and something flickered in those mercury eyes. Amusement, maybe? "Did you think we were decorative?" Darius found himself moving to help without fully understanding why. "Everyone says your people are fragile. Everyone assumes what they want to see." Nessara shifted position, and he caught a glimpse of lean muscle beneath her translucent skin. "Hand me that support rod." They worked in synchronized silence for the next 20 minutes, Nessara directing him with quiet confidence that completely contradicted every story he'd heard. When they finally secured their small shelter, Darius sank down against the wall, watching her with new eyes. She settled across from him, close enough that their knees almost touched in the narrow space. Her glow pulsed gently with her breathing, and Darius found himself mesmerized by the rhythm. "Thank you," she said softly, "for coming back for me. I couldn't just leave you." Most would have. There was no bitterness in her voice, only observation. "Your people think we break easily." Darius met her gaze, feeling heat that had nothing to do with the close air. "I'm starting to think I've been very wrong about a lot of things." Nessara's lips curved into the slightest smile, and in the intimate darkness of their stone cocoon, Darius felt something shift, not in the tunnel around them, but in the careful walls he'd built around his assumptions. Around his heart. Her luminescence brightened fractionally, and he wondered if she could sense the change in him, the way his pulse had quickened when she smiled. "We have hours until rescue," Nessara murmured. "Perhaps it's time you learn the truth." Breaking assumptions. The rescue took 6 hours, not 3. By the time they emerged, Darius knew more about Nessara than he'd learned about anyone in years. She told him about the resonance, the planetary energy her people could sense and manipulate. About how Sylphine bones were denser than human ones, their muscles deceptively strong despite their slender build. About the exhausting work of monitoring energy rifts that could tear the colony apart. "I traversed the deep canyons alone," she explained, her shoulder pressed against his in the darkness. "Sometimes for days. Carrying equipment your miners refuse to touch because they think I'll drop it." Darius felt shame burn through him. "We've been treating you like glass figurines." "Yes." Her fingers brushed his hand, Whether by accident or design, he couldn't tell. But you're learning. When they finally emerged into Velthra's perpetual twilight, the medical team descended. Darius found himself reluctant to leave her side, inventing reasons to stay nearby as they were checked over. Dinner. The word escaped before he could reconsider. Tonight. Let me apologize properly. Nessera's mercury eyes studied him with an intensity that made his breath catch. The observation deck. Sunset. She arrived dressed in flowing fabric that shifted colors with her bioluminescence. Darius had chosen a spot away from curious eyes, a corner table where Velthra's twin moons were just rising. I've been thinking about what you said, Darius began as she sat. About assumptions. And. Nessera leaned forward, close enough that her unique scent, like ozone and night-blooming flowers, made him dizzy. I want to know the real you. Not the myths. Something softened in her expression. They talked through dinner, conversation flowing easily now that the barriers were cracking. She told him about Sylphine music, about the crystalline gardens beneath the colony. He shared stories of Earth, of why he'd come to this distant world. When they walked to the viewing port afterward, Darius found his hand seeking hers. Her fingers interlaced with his, warm and strong, and the touch sent electricity through him. Your people would disapprove, she whispered, but didn't pull away. Let them. He turned to face her, close enough now to see the delicate patterns that swirled beneath her luminous skin. I'm done believing their lies. Nessera reached up, her fingertips tracing his jaw with feather-like precision. This is dangerous, Darius. The best things usually are. When their lips met, it was tentative at first, a question more than an answer. But then her hand slid to the back of his neck, pulling him deeper, and Darius felt the world reduced to just this. Her mouth on his, her body pressed close, the soft glow of her skin brightening with what he now recognized as desire, not fear. They broke apart breathless, foreheads touching. Stay with me tonight, he murmured. Just stay. Her answer was another kiss, fiercer this time, full of promise. The hidden power. The raiders hit the colony at dawn, human scavengers after the mineral shipments. Darius was walking Nessera back to the Sylphine Quarter when the first explosion rocked the eastern wall. People scattered, screaming. Darius instinctively moved to shield Nessera, but she caught his arm with surprising strength. Get the civilians to shelter, she commanded, her voice carrying authority he'd never heard before. Now, Darius. I'm not leaving. Trust me. Her eyes blazed with inner light. Please. He hesitated, then ran to help evacuate the market district. But he couldn't help glancing back. What he saw stopped him cold. Nessera stood alone in the plaza as raiders descended. Her skin blazed brilliant white, so bright he had to squint. The air around her shimmered like heat waves, and when the first raider raised his weapon, she raised her hand. The ground itself responded. Crystalline spikes erupted from the stone, forming a barrier. Energy crackled along her arms, not technology, but something primal, pulled from Velthra's core. The raiders stumbled back, their weapons useless against the raw planetary force she wielded. A resonance warden. The colony's rumors whispered about them, Sylphine guardians with power beyond comprehension. Darius had thought them legend. The battle lasted minutes. When it ended, the raiders were contained, disarmed, and Nessera stood at the center of it all, her glow slowly dimming. She swayed, and Darius was there in an instant, catching her before she fell. Hey, I've got you. He cradled her against his chest, feeling her trembling. Told you, not fragile, she breathed, managing a weak smile. You're incredible. He carried her toward the medical center, his heart pounding with awe and fear and something deeper. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed? Fair point. He adjusted his hold, tucking her closer. I believe now. He stayed while the doctors examined her, ignoring their protests about visiting hours. When they finally left her to rest, Darius sat beside her bed, holding her hand. That power, he said quietly. It's why they really fear you. Not because you're weak, because you're dangerous. Nessera's fingers tightened on his. We only defend. Never attack first. But yes, humans built their prejudice on fear disguised as pity. I was such a fool. You're here now. She turned her head, meeting his gaze. That matters more. Darius leaned down, kissing her forehead, her cheek, finally her lips, gentle, reverent. I'm not going anywhere. Convergence. The energy rifts began appearing 3 days after the raid. Nessera recovered quickly, but the planet itself seemed wounded. Darius found her at the monitoring station at midnight, studying readings that made no sense to his untrained eyes. It's accelerating, she said without looking up. The mining operations destabilized something deep in the mantle. If we don't seal the rifts, they'll consume the entire colony within a week. What do you need? She finally turned, exhaustion evident in the dimness of her glow. Access to the deep core. And someone who knows the tunnel systems better than anyone. Me. It's dangerous, Darius. The energy down there, it could kill you. He crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. Then keep me alive. We're partners now, remember? Something fierce and tender flashed in her eyes. She kissed him hard, pouring 3 days of worry and longing into it. When they broke apart, her glow had brightened considerably. Tomorrow at dawn, she whispered against his lips. Tonight, don't leave. They barely made it to her quarters. Darius had never seen the Sylphine residential section. Few humans had. Her room was filled with growing crystals that hummed softly, casting rainbow refractions across the walls. It's beautiful, he breathed. You're beautiful. Nessera's hands slid under his shirt, her touch electric. I want to show you everything. My world, my truth. They undressed each other slowly, mapping new territory with gentle reverence. Her luminous skin fascinated him, the way patterns swirled and brightened with her emotions, the way she gasped when he traced them with his fingers and lips. Here, she guided his hand to a spot just below her collarbone where her glow pulsed strongest. This is where we feel everything. Our heartlight. Darius pressed his palm there, feeling the rhythm sync with his own heartbeat. I feel you. She pulled him down onto the bed, their bodies fitting together as if designed for this moment. Every touch was discovery, every kiss a promise. When they finally joined, Nessera's entire body blazed with light so brilliant the crystals in her room sang in harmony. I love you, Darius whispered against her throat. Stars help me, I love you. I know. Her legs wrapped around him, pulling him deeper. I've loved you since the tunnel. Since you saw me. They moved together through the night, learning each other's rhythms, breaking down every last barrier between their worlds with touch and breath and whispered confessions. At dawn, they descended into the planet's heart together. The core chamber was vast, filled with unstable energy that made Darius's hair stand on end. Nessera moved through it like she was dancing, her hands weaving patterns in the air as she worked to redirect the rifts. There. Darius pointed to a structural weakness his geological training recognized. If you can reinforce that junction. Guide me, she called back, her voice strained. I can't see it clearly through all this energy. They worked in perfect synchronization, his knowledge of stone and her command of planetary forces combining into something greater than either could achieve alone. Hours blurred together. When the final rift sealed, they collapsed against each other, exhausted and triumphant. We did it, Darius laughed breathlessly. We did. Nessera turned in his arms, her face radiant with joy and spent power. Together. The kiss they shared tasted like victory and forever. Written in starlight. The colony council meeting was packed. Darius stood beside Nessera at the front, facing dozens of skeptical human and Sylphine faces alike. The rifts are sealed, Nessera reported, her voice steady despite the hostile stares. But prevention requires cooperation. Integrated monitoring teams. Shared knowledge. You're asking us to trust them. A human miner spat. After seeing what she did to those raiders. She saved your lives, Darius cut in, his hand finding Nessera's beneath the table. All of you. And she nearly died doing it. He speaks truth. An elderly Sylphine elder rose, her glow steady silver. But there is another matter. This bond between the human and our warden. The room fell silent. Nessera's fingers tightened on Darius's. It violates no laws, she said quietly. But we understand if. It violates nothing, the elder interrupted, surprising them both. In fact, perhaps it shows us the path forward. If a human geologist and a resonance warden can bridge our peoples through trust and. She paused meaningfully. Affection. Perhaps others can as well. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, not all approving, but thoughtful. The integration teams will be voluntary, the colony administrator finally declared. But recommended. We cannot afford another rift crisis. Later, they stood in the crystalline gardens Nessera had promised to show him, a hidden cavern where Sylphine had cultivated light-singing stones for generations. The crystals responded to Nessera's presence, their hum building to something like music. Your people will come around, she said, leaning back against his chest as they watched the light show. Eventually. So will yours. Darius wrapped his arms around her waist, tucking his chin over her shoulder. We'll make them see what I see, that strength and gentleness aren't opposites. That different doesn't mean incompatible. And if they don't, then we'll prove it every day. He turned her to face him, losing himself in those mercury eyes. You showed me the truth beneath the myths, Nessera. You trusted me with your power, your vulnerability, your heart. I'm not walking away from that. From you. Ever. Her glow brightened until the entire garden blazed with reflected light. I used to think I was meant to walk alone. That my power made me too different, even from my own people. You're not alone anymore. Darius kissed her softly, then deeper, until they were both breathless. We're writing something new. Together. A new story, she agreed, her smile radiant. Written in starlight and stone. They stayed in the gardens until Velthra's twin moons rose, planning their future, integrated survey teams, cultural exchange programs, a life built on the foundation of mutual respect and fierce, undeniable love. Around them, the crystals sang their approval, and somewhere deep in the planet's heart, the resonance hummed in harmony. The myths had called her fragile. The truth was so much better. She was strong, powerful, extraordinary. And somehow, impossibly, she was his. Just as he was hers. The end.